Hey, welcome everyone, and welcome to a brand new Hands-On with Maxon workshop. My name is Elly, I'm a trainer at Maxon, and I'm joined by fellow UK trainer and a very good friend of mine, Matt. How's it going, Matt?
Hello, it's going okay, thank you. It's good to be back in this training seat. It seems like it's been a very long time since we did this, but I
I
guess it
know,
was only about 6 months
yes.
ago.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, me and Matt run the Hands-On with Maxon Beginners Cinema 4D workshop, which if you'd like to know where to find that, you can find it on the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. And yeah, that's like a recurring course and workshop that we run twice a year. And we came to being like about to do it again in kind of like this sort of time frame. And then we decided, after a couple of comments from people saying, oh, why don't you do like the next step up? We thought, hey, why not write a brand new course and actually do the next step up? So that's the idea of this new workshop. We're calling it Cinema 4D Level Up. And the idea is, it's to boost Cinema 4D artists to the next level on their 3D journey. And so what we did, we had a bit of a discussion like we did before the beginners workshop, and we thought, okay, how many weeks, what kind of topics, what's our target audience? And this is what we came up with. We came up with a 6-part workshop where we're going to dive into some new and fun kind of topics and disciplines inside of Cinema 4D, stuff that we didn't get to show before that
Wait,
we
no one said
both
it had to be
agreed.
fun.
Oh, no fun allowed.
There we go, that's better.
We thought there'd be some really fun topics that we didn't get to show that we really wanted to show, and there are, even though Matt said no fun, they are a lot of fun. So here's a bit of a breakdown of the 6 parts. So as you can see, we're going to be working in S26. That is a big thing, and also in Redshift 3.5. However, if you don't have 26 installed or kind of up and running yet, then it's not going to be the end of the world. By all means, you can still take part in this workshop. Some of the stuff will be the new features in 26, and we'll be talking about those in a little bit anyway. But I would say maybe like 75% of the stuff, if you've got 25 and maybe even 24, shouldn't be a problem. Then part 2, so this will be next week, we are diving into all things to do with volumes. And what we love about these topics is we can spread them over Cinema 4D, but also spread it over Redshift as well. So we're going to be looking at like the volume builder, like modeling with volumes, but also fog, and then fog volumes inside of Redshift. So that's the idea. We want to try and incorporate a little bit of Redshift each and every week. Now we have Redshift CPU. Everyone that has Cinema 4D, especially Cinema 4D 26, has access to Redshift. So we thought, why not put that alongside this new level up workshop every single week? And then, as you can see in part 6, we'll be doing a whole kind of deep dive into Redshift. So there is an entire course guide, which should be in the handout section of GoToWebinar. However, I can't actually see it, even though I know I've set it up. So let me know if you can't see that, and we will link you to all of this lovely information. You can see exactly what we're going to be covering over the next 6 weeks.
I can see the handout if that helps.
Oh, okay, cool. I can't, which is really strange. And I was panicking. I was like, I'm going to tell everyone it's in the handout, and then it's not going to be there.
It
That's good to
says
know.
one of handout, how Maxon level up 2022.pdf. Yes, other people can see the handouts as well. Excellent. Thank you, people.
Excellent. That is good. Thank you for letting me know, everyone. And Matt, that's great. That's good. Yeah, so all the links are on there, as well as like the course guide and everything that you could possibly need for the next 6 weeks. If you have been part of our hands-on workshops, you know we like to give you as much extra stuff to help you on your journey as we possibly can. And so the first thing we do is all of these sessions get recorded, every single one of them from start to finish, and we upload it onto the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. And so you have permanent access to them. They're not going anywhere. They're not password protected. They are there for you to look at. And they're also going to be timestamped. So if you turn up late, or if you can't make a session, or if you want to go back and watch something again, if you kind of missed it, not a problem. Our aim is to get them on there maybe by the same day. If not, definitely by the following morning. That is a promise. And speaking of unlimited access, we have also, me and Matt have been putting together a whole bunch of project files, because we thought it would be really fun that this was like a practical, interactive, project-based workshop. Because who doesn't love, you know, learning tools and creating stuff at the same time? That's what we love to do. So we thought we should do that for you guys as well. So we've been putting a whole bunch of project files on the Dropbox link, which is also in the handout section. And there's one for every single week at least, but we're going to be uploading more and more, especially for the motion weeks and for the color weeks. So there'll be a lot on there, and you can have that stuff. You can have the models. So Matt's been modeling some incredible stuff for this workshop. You can have it. You can have the materials, the HDRI images, everything. Use them for your projects. Don't worry about it. They are officially yours.
However, don't forget, if you do manage to make any successful NFTs, me and Elly are in on that cut. Thank you very much.
Yes, remember who taught you in the first place. So this next one is quite a biggie. For anyone who doesn't have access to a Maxon license, then don't worry. Anyone attending who doesn't have a Cinema 4D license will be able to benefit from an extended trial. So this is quite a big one. We did this for the Redshift workshop in February, and it was hugely successful. The one thing I would say is you do need to have the Maxon app installed and a Maxon account, and then please activate your trial first before you get in touch with us. And that's because in order for us to extend the trial, there has to be an active one on there. We can't do it for you, unfortunately. So if you take anything from what I'm saying in these first like 10 minutes, that is the most important thing. So install the Maxon app, just go to the maxon.net website, go on the try page, and then you can install the Maxon app, create yourself a Maxon account if you haven't already got one, and then activate that trial. And you'll have it for 2 weeks anyway. So even if we don't get to extend your trial in the next like couple of days, then don't worry, you have it for 2 weeks, then we'll extend it for the entire 6. And then yeah, just email training@maxon.net and then let us know in the description, like trial extension or something.
Do please make sure you use the correct email and the email that you have the Maxon account from. I am the one who actually extends trials, and there are a number of times where I've had to go, this person doesn't have an account, this person doesn't have a trial, this person doesn't exist. So please make sure that you have a My Maxon account. You have started the trial before emailing Elly and going,
yes, those are the important steps, because we want to extend it. We want to give you as many kind of possibilities to be on this workshop with us and to be following along. And so that's the only stuff you have to do, and then we'll do it for you. We'll do the rest for you. It's fine. So a big thing that we like to do, if you've been on any of our live shows, not just the hands-on stuff, but the Ask the Trainers, the Demystifying Post-Production, we love live Q&A, and we hope you love it too, because we want it to be as interactive as possible. And so you are graced with not only one trainer, but 2 trainers on this workshop. So between us, we are more than happy to answer your questions. There is a question area inside of GoToWebinar. So drop your questions in there. If it's related to the topic we're doing, we will definitely be answering them live. We'll be doing them inside of Cinema 4D or inside of Redshift, depending on what the topic is. Or for a lot of them, we can just answer them inside the question area. That is what we want to do. So please, by all means, drop your questions in, and we will do our very best to answer each and every one. If not, on the Redshift workshop, I was putting together a document at the end of each session, answering those quick questions, and I'll upload that onto the Dropbox. And so I'll probably do the same thing for this workshop too. And most importantly, we want to see the work you're creating, especially in this Level Up workshop. We're going to be together for the next 6 weeks. We're going to be on this journey, creating things, learning new things. And so we would love to see the work you create on any socials. And we actually have our own hashtag, which is #Maxon. So I know a bunch of you use it already on Instagram and Twitter. So no, we do look out for your work, and we would love to see everything that you're building. And again, everything that I was just talking about, all the links, etc., can be found in the handout section of GoToWebinar.
Apparently, some people are struggling with that. They can't seem to download the project files, which is strange because the links are working for me.
Okay, won't download or can't access the Dropbox link? What is?
That's a good question. I mean, I can access the Dropbox link.
Okay, let us know if it's you can't access the actual Dropbox link itself, or whether it's an issue with physically downloading the project files. And then once we get into it, I can have a little go and try and fix that in session. That is not a problem.
Right, thank you.
Cool. So some of you may be wondering, who are these people? Who are these people at Maxon? Why should I be listening to them, you know, for the next 2 hours of my life today? So we thought we'd do a really quick meet the trainers like section. Don't worry, we won't be doing this every single week. I just thought we would introduce ourselves because it's the very start. So Matt, do you wanna tell us a bit about yourself?
No.
Thanks.
Sure.
So
You're welcome. So I'm Matt. I've worked for Maxon now for 5.5 years. I work across both the support and training departments, so I kind of do various things. So occasionally you may find me answering tech support and customer service tickets and things like that. I have been using Cinema 4D for 22 years now, and I've been teaching for about 20 of those. So yeah, I know Cinema 4D quite well, and I've been doing teaching in one shape or form for either colleges, schools, Maxon or whatever for quite some time now. Yes.
So we're in very good hands, as you can see. And I'm Elly Wade, and I've been at Maxon for, I think it's a little over 7 years now, but I've been a full-time trainer for just under 2.5 of those years. So you may have seen my face on a bunch of these hands-on sessions and any other live sessions that we do at Maxon. So the demystifying post-production on Mondays, Ask the Trainers on Thursdays. I like to do as much as I can and take part in these sessions because they're so much fun. It's so great being part of the training team. And alongside that, now the world's opening up again, I'm getting to go to some great events. And recently I went to NAB in Vegas in April to talk about the new release of version 26 and Redshift 3.5. And it was so great to meet artists, Maxon people that I hadn't seen and I'd only kind of like communicated with virtually, and then like a bunch of you guys as well. Yeah, so that's a lot of what I do, which is a lot of fun. I'm happy to be here with you guys. So all that introduction aside, let's actually talk about and get into what we're going to be doing today. So part 1, working with S26. That's the main title that we're going with. And this is our session plan. I'm going to do this at the start of every single session, just so you know a breakdown of what we're going to be covering. So the first 2 we can tick off already: course overview and meet the trainers. Hi, that's us. We're also going to be diving into the new tools of S26. We have some pretty key ones, especially relating to modeling and simulation and Redshift. And what's great with this workshop is we're going to try and cover as many of them as we can over the next 6 weeks. So we're trying to incorporate the new features as well. And then with Matt being here, we thought we'd dive into polygonal modeling because Matt really is the master when it comes to modeling. Honestly, I've seen the stuff he does for cosplay, stuff he does for 3D printing, and I'm not just saying that. I'm not using the term master loosely. So we're in very good hands to dive into some really fun polygonal modeling. And as I said, we want to make this interactive, practical, project-based. So we're going to build, if you've seen the hero image for this particular week and week 6, we're going to build a steampunk arcade machine. So Matt actually modeled that himself. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be building that with some of the modeling tools inside of C4D. Then, kind of in the second half of this whole lesson, we're going to be diving into Redshift 3.5 and a first look. So if you've never used Redshift before, or if you're coming from kind of like a previous version of Cinema 4D and things are a little bit different, then don't worry, we're going to be having a very first look, going from scratch, adding some lighting, a couple of simple materials, and then actually getting our first render out of Cinema 4D and Redshift, which will be a really nice comparison, ready for 6 weeks down the line. We can look at this first render and our last render and be like, hey, look at this, look at the differences and how cool it is. And then at the end, we're going to have a little look at what we're going to be doing next week. So, Matt, new tools inside of 26. I thought I would list the major sort of topics and ones here that we're going to be having a little look at. So the modeling tools, do you want to talk a little bit about those before we get into it?
Yeah. So some of these are some nice quality of life improvements that have been added. They do some useful things. I will cover a few of them. It's not that easy to kind of squeeze every single one of these into a modeling workflow, and sometimes you may look at what I'm about to model and go, why have you done it like that? And the answer is because it's going to show the tool off. So there's a couple of different reasons why I do things with this. Obviously, one of the biggest things that we've got in Cinema 4D is the Z remesher, which is amazing. So for those of you that don't know, Z remesher is ZBrush's code for retopologizing models, and it's an incredibly powerful algorithm that makes really nice topology and does all sorts of weird and wonderful clever things. And we have been lucky enough, obviously, to now have merged with ZBrush, and we can snaffle, borrow, take, steal some of that code,
collaborate,
and collaboratively improve Cinema 4D with the Z remesher, which is a really useful thing. We will have a quick example of that next week when we look at volume modeling. The new bridge tools, which is bridging between one polygon and another, which I will explore earlier, just to kind of later, to give some detail on the arcade machine we're about to do. Closed polygon hole with a grid is fairly self-explanatory. It will allow you to, when you close a polygon hole, it will divide it into a grid, so you don't have to worry about making it fit. Equal spacing, fit circle is a really nice one. For those of you who have ever done polygonal modeling, it's really difficult to get circles. And this fit to circle allows you to create an edge and say fit to circle, and it makes one that you can use. So for polygonal modelers, it's great. Poke polygons is quite one of the silliest sounding things I've ever heard, but it's a really useful way of adding polygons, adding points into centers of polygons, and I will show one of its uses for me later on. Set flow, smooth edges and straighten edges are relatively self-explanatory, but I don't touch much of those in what we're about to look at. But they're all sort of available in the right-click menu for polygonal modeling, and you can play with them and see what you can do. And of course, for those of you that don't know, you can always right-click and show help on particular tools so that you can get Cinema 4D's manual on what they do and how they work.
Yes, I love that feature and use it pretty much every day. Cool. Yeah. So thanks, Matt. Yeah. So we're going to be diving into, as Matt just said, a couple of those when he gets into building our steampunk arcade machine. But I also wanted to drop in some of the other kind of key features that came in April, which is the simulation updates. And I won't talk too much about them, but we got a simulation scene which allows us to have different simulations ongoing at the same time with different project settings, different gravity, different forces, etc. We then have a whole new cloth and rope simulation way of working. And we're going to dive into that in part 3 of this workshop, where we're actually going to be doing all things to do with simulation. And in particular, we're going to look at the rope and the spline simulation settings, and then also Redshift 3.5 with a very big update that comes with Redshift CPU, allowing now pretty much anyone to access Redshift inside of Cinema 4D 26, as well as a Redshift standard surface, which is a new material, and some viewport previews, which is inside the viewport when we now use things like reflections and Maxon noises and HDRI images with Redshift. Before, our viewport didn't give us a really accurate kind of feedback or preview, whereas now it does. So it's a lot easier to work with, much like it was inside of standard materials. And we're going to be diving into Redshift, as we said, across the entire weeks, but in particular, part 1 and part 6. So should we get into what we're going to be doing, Matt? People are probably sick of me talking now. They're probably thinking, we want to see some actual stuff now, Elly. And so don't worry.
Apparently, Elly, people want to know the cat. That's the most talked about thing actually at the moment is understanding. This is Kai. Kai comes and helps.
This is what I love. This is what I love about these hands-on sessions. There is always a cat featured. And I think
there is always at least one cat.
Cats you have. I think they always think it's the same one. Believe me, it's not.
Yeah, at the end of the next, because I'm not actually here on the 6th week, so I'm here across the next 5. You have to guess how many cats I actually have, depending how many you guys actually manage to see. But this one is often here. He decides to come and help every time there's a webinar. So, hey ho.
Cool.
Right.
So shall I
yes.
over to you? Let me do this. And as always, everyone, do not forget question area. Ask us your questions. We're more than happy to answer them. And I also want to say hey to everyone in the chat, because I know normally we do that at the start, but I thought I would do the introductions, you know, get all that out of the way, and then say hey to everyone. So hey to Hannah, Marcelo, Brian, Ahmed, Marcos, Jay, Anders, Ricky, Demetrios. There are so many, Sharon, Jennifer, so many names I recognize and names I don't recognize, which is amazing. Thank you everyone for being here with us. We're excited to like embark on this journey with you. Cool.
And there we go. Right, thank you very much for joining me. I hope that was useful. Here's one I made earlier in a typical Blue Peter fashion. For those of you outside of the UK, you won't know what that means. So this is what we're going to be taking a brief look at. A little bit of polygonal modeling. Now, one of the weird things I kind of find, it's a question we get asked a lot, which is, hey, can you do some advanced modeling? And maybe it's just me, but I kind of struggle to necessarily determine what people think of as advanced modeling, largely because the modeling tools that you use and show like at the beginning in the beginner's course don't change. Advanced modeling is that you might be modeling a more complicated form, but modeling doesn't necessarily change. However, there are different ways to approach things, and there are new tools that I can show and use to give you examples of things. Some of this stuff I have snaffled from the content browser. That's just the way it is. So I'm going to show you some tips and tricks and things of how I built this. Things like symmetry, things like cloning along splines and things, edge to circles, poke polygons we've got here in the center and stuff. But just things that make life nice and easy, and using deformers to help do things as well. So that's what I'm going to show. I'm giving myself about an hour to do it, because that's what I do. And then we can have a look at redshifting, something like that.
No, I like
adding textures, materials. Redshiftifying. It works with the demystifying and things. Yeah. Some of the stuff that we've got to make this look prettier at the end. But you can see that I largely focus on modeling. And you can also see that I probably need to start labeling. So for those of you that get this file, have we given them? We have given them the files already. I'm sorry. I'll try and make this one a bit better.
It's all part of the challenge.
That's really bad. So that's something I've got to look at for the next one. I'm sorry. So let's have a look at how I started. And funnily enough, I started, hello, viewport. There we go. I started with a cube. Okay. The other thing that's really important to do when modeling is reference material. You know, I had a lot of different pictures of like mini arcade machines, or, you know, 3D renders of arcade machines and things, as well as 3D renders or steampunk-ified things, like anything from steampunk arcade machines to Mega Drives to Game Boys and things like that, and it all helps, gives you a bit of inspiration. I had to stop at some point, at one point where I thought, I've only got an hour to be able to show this, otherwise I could just keep adding cogs and wheels and panels and electric light diodes and all sorts of things like that, and plus snaffling things from the content browser. So you could keep going, of course, with adding detail, but hey, finished, not perfect, is the thing that you need to be aware of whenever you're modeling something. So I started with a cube. Great. And the first thing that I'm going to do to this cube is I'm going to chop it in half along the x-axis. Dunk. Now you can't see that because I haven't got any way of showing the polygons on. So I'm just going to go to display, crowd shading lines, and you can see that I have now sliced my polygon in half. So this has one half and the other. And the reason for this is I'm going to make my object editable, which can either be done with this button here, if you guys don't know, or as you can see, it lovely brings a pop-up that says converts a parametric object into a polygonal object in brackets C. C means it's the shortcut. So press C and it changes. So it is now no longer a parametric object, means it's not created by its parameters. It's now polygonal, and I have access to its edges, points, and polygons. So let's select its points. I'm going to look at the top view, using the bottom here, and then I'm going to use my live selection. I'm actually going to change to rectangular selection, select the left-hand side, and delete. Goodbye. And the reason for that is I will be using Symmetry, which is a great use of modeling. It saves time of having to make sure that one side matches the other, because you only have to do stuff on one side. So with my Symmetry, you can see that it now looks exactly the same, but I only have access to the polygons on one side. But it means that whatever I do to one, it does t'other, which is exactly what I want it to do. So things like this, I can grab and I can move around, and it will work on both sides. So let's get the very basics of my steampunk arcade up and running. So the basic shape here, which, as you can see, I have a symmetry on and a subdivision surface, is, you can see half of it. Don't mean to copy and paste. Is this outline? That's the outline that I'm going to go for. Okay, so what I'm going to do, let's start with my cube. Hooray, that's a cube. That works for a base. Great, that's all I need. So I am going to use some various modeling tools. I mean, there is a modeling layout, and the modeling layout gets rid of the timeline for me and puts some modeling tools on the left-hand side, which I'm going to stick with. So it's a really nice change to the shift. For those of you that wanted to know how I did that, you've got the standard layout at the top, or you have the model layout here. Brings the coordinates manager back without needing the hot corner, gets rid of the stuff down the bottom for the timeline, but gives you some nice modeling tools along the left. They are dynamic palettes, as we've discussed previously, which means they change depending on whether or not I have points, edges, or polygons, or object on. So just be aware, if that tool disappears, whichever mode you're on up here will determine what you can and can't see. And the tool I'm going to use is Extrude. So Extrude is one of those lovely buttons that allows you to add more geometry. That's what we need to do. Let's face it, this is a cube. I'm not going to get any form of arcade machine out of this at the moment. Now, with my polygon selected, my Extrude tool there, I can click and drag in an empty space. And you can see that I do that. And I now have 2 polygons. If I'd have grabbed the handle, I would just be moving the original polygon. So using a blank space, click and drag, and then I have extra polygons here, which is fine. Then I'm going to select this. So I've just done the outline, which is the base block. I'm going to do like the easy control panel. If you just look at the way this model works, let me just actually get into the polygons. It's super simple. I've got the height of the base, the height of the control panel bit, the height of the screen bit, the height of the bit at the top. And that's really what I'm going to do. It is that simple. So I've got the height of the base bit, I've got the height of the control panel bit, which I'm just going to lower because that's a bit big. And then I'm going to do the screen. Now there is another trick. You know how I said don't grab the handles? Well, if you have control selected on your keyboard, and that works for PC or Mac, so I'm holding down control on my keyboard, and you can see that my cursor changes. It's got the little tiny 2 squares. That means I can click and drag up. Yay, I'm doing yet another extrude. Dunk. This is cool. Okay, and then I'm going to extrude up again. Dunk. And so now I have the base, the control bit, the TV bit, and the overhead bit. Wow, I hear you are dead impressed. To save on time, I'm going to select these two with shift clicking. So select the first one, because I'm still technically on the move tool, and then shift click, and then I've got 2 polygons selected. It means I can then hold down control and click and drag again, and I have a very basic, super basic Madubri arcade machine. Of course, I'm going to do some tweaks. It's not quite the same shape that I want, so I'm going to move things around, and there are various things I can do to that, like edges. Now, if I select this edge, can you see, okay, whilst that might be cool, that may not be the shape that I want or the way I want it to go. And it's because the axis handles are being displayed on the orientation, okay, of the axis. You can control that. So it's the orientation of this. You see, if I do polygon, it's working that way. It changes that way. If I grab an edge, then depending on where the edge is, if that one's going perpendicular, this one is going tangentially. Now there's a word for you. If I don't want that, over here in the modeling axis information of my move transform tool, I can choose the orientation from axis to world. And that means it realigns the axis to the same as the world axis up here. And I can do that. And it means that it goes backwards as opposed to, well, perpendicularly as it would have done earlier. So let's do that as well. So let's move that backwards so that there can be a control. I might change the size of that in a minute, but hey, we'll do that in a second. So how much does that compare to mine up here? Come on. So you can see that that's actually straight up, but it's up that it's gone rather than back. But hey, ooh, that's a surprise for next week. But we can do that as well. So selecting up, I can give it a bit of a change, or I can move that across. Ooh, wrong one. Selecting that way, and you can just get a bit of different shape to it, which is absolutely fine. Okay. Other things to look at, let's say I don't like how high that is, or maybe I do, and I can change it that way. So now that we've got more of a area where there can be a platform and an area where there can just be more detail. So that's some super simple stuff. A really nice tool that I quite like, that I use quite a bit when I'm messing around with polygons, is one called Slide. And this slide allows me to slide the edges or points along the original, like where it is. So it can't go forward and backwards from these two if I was to select this one, but it can go up and down it. So it keeps it in line, or it can slide along the front. So Slide is a really useful tool for me. You can bring that in and move stuff around. You only have the option of sliding things up and down or across. So let me show you a point. So that point will slide along, will slide along that line or that line, that line, that line, or that line. I can't go anywhere else, but I can move it around. So Slide is a really, really nice tool to be able to use. Okay, so that is our uber basic shape, but I am going to adjust something. Let's grab that, and I'm going to go back to my move tool because I want to move stuff beyond its original shape. I'm going to move that back and move that down. So we've got a slightly more slanted view of what eventually will be our screen panel for our arcade machine. Now, I'm just going to pause quickly. Are there any questions thus far?
Just having a quick look. A lot of people just saying, hey, I'm just trying to reply as much as I can to everyone. So Sharon was wondering, do any of us as trainers make hotkeys for like points, edges, polygons? So I know you do a lot of modeling, so that's quite a good question for you.
I don't. And funnily enough, the other day I was thinking, God, I wish there was a button that did that. Although in theory, you can press enter to cycle through. So return on your keyboard will cycle through points, edges, and stuff, which is a kind of useful thing to know. But I don't have specific hotkeys for the individual ones, no.
Yeah, I don't set up any. Like, I'm really kind of like default cinema body, which is so bad. I really should actually get into it.
I don't make my own hotkeys, but I do use shortcuts a lot. And to be honest, you only really start using shortcuts a lot when I think you process things a great deal. So because I'm modeling, I use a lot of shortcuts. But when I was less worried about speed, I didn't. It's just one of those things. Like, to be honest, until I actually started working for Maxon, if I wanted to move the camera, I used these 3 buttons like forever.
Okay,
so it's
those are
only
the shortcuts that
last...
I do definitely use. I definitely do like the move, scale, rotate, and the 1, 2, 3.
I see. I don't even use 1, 2, 3 anymore. I use Option and then the 3 mouse buttons. So Option and left click will allow you to pan around wherever you click. Option and right click will allow you to dolly in and out, and Option and middle click allows you to that's panning, yeah. So that's rotate, panning, and dollying. So, and then that allows for super fast movement of things. So
Yeah,
but
shortcuts are your friends.
yeah,
We forgot a great question from Joe, who was wondering, what's the difference between modeling with triangles versus quads? When should you be using one or the other? And my favorite bit, are n-gons evil?
yes. In reverse order, yes. Always with quads, don't with triangles. In theory. It depends on what you're modeling. If you are modeling something like this, and it's relatively simple, it is a static model, so there's no deforming or moving parts, and you won't UV unwrap your object, no one cares. Triangles, quads, n-gons, 18-sided polygons, no one will care. I didn't say that. If you are doing a deforming object, such as a character, facial rig, and things like that, quads, absolutely. Triangles are bad, because triangles will not deform correctly. So you always want to be doing in nice flows of quad polygons. If you are going to UV unwrap anything, triangles and n-gons are evil, because you won't. How do you unwrap a 7-sided polygon and make it fit? At least with quads you can move stuff. So it depends on, how am I texturing, is my model moving, and will anybody see it?
I thought that was a great question.
That is a good question.
Another quick one from Amy. She was wondering, how did you get that tool list in the viewport? And I believe it's because you changed your layout. Is that right? So you've got your modeling tools on the left-hand side.
So the standard layout, well, actually, the tool list here is depending on which one of these I have selected. To be honest, the only difference between that and the modeling layout is that the coordinates manager stays up and the timeline disappears. It's a small difference, but at least it's helpful. But the tool list on the left depends on which one of these modes you have selected, whether it's object, polygons, edges, point.
Cool, thanks.
It's all right.
So just having a quick look through. Oh, could you quickly show, Joey was wondering if you could show where Symmetry was again, please.
Yep, okay. So over here is a bunch of generators. It's under the subdivision surface. If you click and hold, Symmetry is here. And then the object goes into the Symmetry. Symmetry acts exactly as expect as a mirror. You can choose the plane that it is going to mirror from and the tolerance. This tolerance is how far the points are at 0 as to whether or not it merges together or not, which is quite useful. And the cube goes inside the generator to generate the file. And you can also turn the generator on and off, which is really useful. Now, I'm expecting to see something interesting here, which is a technique you've got to be aware of when you are using Symmetry and extruding, which is, it fills in the middle. It's just the way Extrude works. So if it's in a Symmetry, if you take a cube and you extrude up normally, it creates a side for all 4 of the edges that you have extruded, as you would expect. It does the same with Symmetry. So because I had extruded up from here and up, it creates the internal polygons as well. Now, in this sort of mode, it's not a problem. However, if I was to add a subdivision surface, it starts to go a little bit odd and have strange effects on edges. So I will turn the subdivision surface off and get rid of it for the moment. It's wise when looking at Symmetry that you nip in every now and again, select the internal polygons that you don't need and delete them. So this is what I want to have in my Symmetry, is basically as though I've cut it open and I can see inside. So it's always wise to turn off your Symmetry every now and again and have a look. Okay, any questions? Any more questions?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of people ask this actually. Ralph and, oh, I can't see, Adnane are wondering where the slide tool is.
Oh, right click, and you need to be on edges or points. Right click, slide. So
And you have to say it like that.
Slide, yeah. The dynamic palettes on the left are a highlighted selection of the most useful tools. They are not all of the tools that you can use. So if you right click, you will find even more.
Cool.
Sweet. Okay.
I think one more quick one from Bim. Is Symmetry going to automatically merge the vertices, or do you have to do that manually?
That does it automatically, and that's where the tolerance comes in. So any point that is less than 0.01 of there, it will automatically merge and treat it as a single object.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for any more questions.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to, as you can see, I have selected one side of this, the right-hand side face, and then I'm going to use a shortcut, which is, I'm going to press M for those of you that don't know. That brings up a modeling shortcut. Whatever you do, don't move the mouse. Because it's a shortcut, every time you move the mouse to try and press on it, it'll go away. So leave the mouse alone, press M, and then you press another keyboard to get the second. So it's kind of like a dual shortcut selection. So I want M and I want Extrude, which is T. And that brings up my Extrude tool, for those of you who didn't want to just go to the left-hand side and press it. And this time I'm going to just bring that out again, say about, let's make it 50. Now, whilst you can see that my offset says 54.9439, because I'm still active in this tool, because I haven't done anything else, I can adjust that. So if I put 50, that brings that in there. And I now have this much wider unit, which looks cooler anyway. So I've got control over this. So as you can see, I can still do this. I can add variations if I want to. I can even add subdivisions, which is cool, but useful, but not what I want to do right now. So I've just offset that by 100. Let's put that back to 50. There we go. So that's what I wanted to do. And now I want to select the new loop that I've just created. So I'm going to press U and L. So U brings up the selection and other things shortcut window, and U and L allows a loop selection. So press L, and then I'm going to select that loop there. And that selects the bottom, which is cool, but I don't want it. So going to my move tool, just because I do, or you can go to selections, I'm going to shift click the bottom because I no longer want that bottom one selected. Okay, we good with that? Good. Then I'm going to press D because there's another shortcut for extrude. Why? Don't know. And I'm going to just extrude those out. Now, that was doing well up until a point. You can see that it gets those, but it doesn't extrude those properly, which is not what I wanted. So I need to adjust my maximum angle that it will recognize as being a group. And you can see that as soon as I get over 97, that top corner pings together. And as soon as I get over to 128, that one pings together as well. So I now have this lovely kind of block built structure of joy. It's very polygonally modeled, isn't it? It looks like it's straight out of Tron, but hey ho. So that's one of the tools, and that gives me my nice extrusion, which is what we're going to use to, if I just nip back to the one I made earlier, gives me this addition. Now, I've got some extra detail on here, haven't I? And the reason I have not shown you that is because it's going to involve using one of the new tools. So I'm going to delete that polygon. So I've deleted that loop now. Bye-bye. That's all gone completely. And the reason for this, I'm now going to use the new bridge tool to adjust the way this is going to merge back together. Yes, I could have done this a different way, but it doesn't get me to show you the tool. I'm also going to show you a really cool selection method. So on my move tool, or you can be on a selection tool. I mean, I can paint if I want, but it's lengthy. So on my move tool, which for those of you who want to know the shortcut is E, I'm going to select the bottom one there, and then holding Control and Shift, I'm going to select the top one. And that selects everything in between. And then I'm going to click Shift Control there. And then I'm going to click Shift Control all the way there and there again. And I've now selected that loop. I'm not going to Control Shift click the next one, but I am going to Shift click it to add it to my selection. I don't want to Control Shift because I don't want the middle one. However, I am going to Control Shift click all of these, and I am going around the edge to stop it from attempting to go across. So I've effectively just selected the two loops. Okay, are you with me so far? So I've selected the outer loops because I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to the bridge tool. Hooray. And the bridge tool has restrictor selection, so it won't do anything crazy. And what I can do, I can click and drag from one side to the other because I've got them all selected, you see, and I can merge both at the same time. If I didn't have them all selected, I would have to bridge them individually and this would become very lengthy. But what I like about this, because I've got the two selected, it matches the same number of polygons and I go thunk and it remaps them. Why on earth would you do that, Matt? You've just deleted those polygons, I hear you say. But I can add some subdivisions if I want to, which, yes, I could have knifed before, but that's beside the point. But the fun part is I can add tension. Okay, so I can move things this way. And I can, ooh, what did I do before? I should be able to do That's interesting. Ah, there it is, because I changed it to surface. Haha. Sorry, change it to surface, and then with the tension, there we go. We can create some chunkier sort of outlines of what we will be trying to create. So the tension, I don't think I need the spin steps. It didn't make any difference. You can flip it so it goes inwards instead if you want, which is also quite angular, which I quite like, but I prefer the non-flipped. Ooh, which it now. Oh, I need to undo. Bridge, rebridge, ding. Ooh. What did that do? That's gone crazy. Let's reset that to default. Hee, I love the fact that you can do that now. Oh, because I didn't. This is what happens when you don't select the right number of polygons. There we go. M and B to bridge. There we go. That's correct. And then put that to surface. And then add some subdivisions. Let's add 3 because I actually liked the middle one better. And then you can choose to go up or you can choose to go down. And then you can flip it one way or another. But just a little bit of detail is something that you couldn't do before with the bridge tool. So that's why I'm showing you this rather lengthy method of what this is the new options in the bridge tool, none of which were here before. So this to be able to do or to add corners between one thing and another, I think is super helpful. And adding detail to this rather chunky and scary looking arcade machine is another thing that I liked to have done. Okay, so that gives me that. Now, one of the other useful tools that has been given to us in this, which I described earlier as silly named, is a poke polygon. And what poke polygon does is it takes a polygon that you have and it pokes it. Dunk. It's like someone's put a point smack bang in the middle, and that's useful in some instances and less useful in others. I'm going to use this to create like a grill or a grate down the bottom. I'm going to make it slightly differently from the one that we've shown, just because I think it looked a bit too much. This is supposed to be a steampunk arcade, so at some point somewhere in this device is a fire, and so I want to have there be some form of grill or grate here that allows us to see the fire. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink the size that this is going to appear. So I'm going to inset. Now, if I do an inset here, we have a bit of a difference because it's working as symmetry. Okay, that's kind of fine. But what if I wanted the grill to go all the way across? This happens a lot when you do offsets and insets and things like this. It's got preserve groups on, but there's nothing I can do because it is insetting into the polygon. So what I have to do a little bit of jiggery pokery, and I have to delete the internal polygon that I don't need. Now I have a hole. And then select this edge, and you can see that I can make it move around. Now I can go in different things or move it around and completely screw it up. However, I want it at 0, and the easiest way to get it at 0 is to select its X position. So this is actually the position of the selection. As you can see, its X position here, make that 0, and that becomes 1 sort of area that I can use as a polygon. And another very useful tool, if I right click here, is Subdivide. Now Subdivide, I can do a couple of times, and I think I want like 4. Thunk, 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 thunk. And that gives me a really nice grid. What was it you said about n-gons earlier? And for those of you saying that that isn't an n-gon, oh, it really is. Because it just might be a flat side, but nonetheless, it has lots of points. But don't tell Elly because she's not UV unwrapping this, so it's not a problem. So selecting, just to undo, so selecting all of these back, I'm going to right click and poke. And that just gives me all of these lovely new points that I can play around with. Now, if there was an easier way of selecting these points, that would be like super helpful, but there isn't. So I'm just going to shift select all of these. If there was a way of speeding this up in a tutorial, I would do, but sadly, this is live. And indefinitely, things are always in the wrong. For those of you who suffer from this as well, you will find that wherever you try and click, these axes are in the wrong place or in the right place to be completely in your way. So you either need to zoom in and out so that they are out your way, or for a very brief period of time, turn off the axes. Look, we've even got Alt-D so that we can do that. Option-D on a Mac or Alt-D so that you can get rid of them. And then I can, if I want to, make these like really grungy. So this is going to be a very evil looking grate. And let's do something crazy, which is bevel a point. Beveling a point gives you a really nice square around all of them. And then if I just, I'm going to have to do this again, unfortunately. Dink, 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 dink. Sadly, I don't think there is actually a quicker way of doing this. If there is, tell me.
So Andreas was saying, as you were selecting the points, marquee select?
Would that work? I mean, technically, it depends how greedy the selection is. I mean, I could do that, but I've still got to do each one individually, I think.
He says, a few people are saying top view and select the face polygons with less.
That is an easier one. Yeah, that's very true. There's still no kind of super quick way of, I mean, I can do that, but I'm still gonna, oh, I'd have to turn off tolerance selection and then I'd have to go. That's definitely quicker. So for those of you, you can do what they call tolerance selection, which is, hey, the selection tool almost hit this polygon, so we will allow it, or not. So that's quite a cool one. And then the thing I was going to do with this, quite simply, is just extrude backwards and delete, so that we've got a hole. And yes, there is a hole. You can actually go through it, so that we can see through the other side, so that we can see some fire later on. That was a lot of work just for that and to show you the poke polygon, but yeah, you know, you wanted to see the poke polygon, so that's fine. And then I selected this. This is where I went with kind of like the basics of this thing. I'm just conscious I've got about half an hour left. So I'm going to right click here and I'm going to subdivide. Did I do that? How far did I go? Sorry, got to check. 4, 5, 6. Ooh, I did it another time. So let's subdivide, but not 4 times again. Let's just subdivide one more time. There we go. And then I did some nice selections, which is going to look like an old school. I'm just going to paint these on. Oh, it's because I've turned off tolerance selection. Actually, I think I zoomed it out a bit because it looked better. Yeah, make use of that. And delete. Why would you do that? Oh, oops. Don't delete the ones at the back because I've got visible selection only on. You see, it's really easy to get yourself turned around. And sometimes it's very useful to just reset your tool back to default so that you know you haven't done anything silly. So with this selection and then half delete, I'm going to use an edge tool I'm going to select that, go there. So for those of you from earlier, I selected one, I Control-Shift-clicked that because I wanted it to be that definite line, and then I Control-Shift-clicked that to get that definite line, and then right-click and use my favorite new tool, Fit Circle. But you can only do it when it's a whole circle, because you can't fit half a circle. So I would need to, what would I need to do? I would need to make this one object in order to fit circle. Depending on how much more I'm going to do, which is I think only one more thing that I decided just to add some detail before I do that, which was this, which was same similar thing I did earlier, which is inset that, dunk, delete the middle polygon, select the edge there, make it 0, select my polygons, and now you'll watch what I said earlier about it making internal polygons in reverse. If I Control select that one, can you see we've got the middle polygon here, which I can just select and delete, and now I've got this nice little inset bit where you could put, I don't know, coin things and cogs and wheels and so on and so forth. So, oh, there is one more tiny thing I wanted to do, which is to reselect these, and I'm just going to Control drag them back in because I just want, oh, don't let go of Control too soon. You can see I can move that, or if I hold down Control, I can extrude in or extrude out. So you can actually see the difference when I let go of Control. So I just want to move those back in a bit so it gives me some depth to this sort of chunk that it's made. Okay, but in theory, that is the simplest sort of layout to that and how I made this work. Then I'm going to do something. I'm going to make this one object. Now, there are a couple of different ways of doing this. One, I can make this symmetry object editable. Hooray, there it is, and I've got my cube. That's one way. It's not a way I recommend, and it's for the simple fact that if I ever want to go back to this and I go, ooh, maybe I want to change this, I would have to start again or reslice or do things, and then that would be a pain, and I don't want to do that. So what I do, I will right click on my symmetry and I will create current state to object, which takes this in its current state and makes a new object. So I have a symmetry with a cube in it, great. And then in this one, because I've only got one thing, I will group it in itself because it makes a null. Grouping is option G. This I will call backup. And then I will option click the 2 dots to hide it from render and hide it from editor. So I now have a backup just in case I ever need it to be worked. And I have my incredibly useful thing here. So the U and L for loop select on edges will give me this outer, oh, I don't know why it's not giving me this outer ring. It is an external loop, so let's just Control click, Control Shift click, Control Shift click, Control Shift click, and now I have all of them. And then again, my favorite new tool, right click and hope, fit circle, apply. Yay! So it's done some marginally funky things. I think I may have found a bug that I need to report because it's overlapping here, but over here it's not, even though technically it's the same, which I find very strange. But I'm going to hide it. So for the moment, it doesn't matter. But you can kind of cheat it. What's happening is this polygon is understanding that it is 2 edges are folding in on itself and it is finishing the polygon inside. For some reason, the lower half here doesn't. It displays it as though it's overlapping, whereas over here, it's displaying it correctly. So that's definitely a bug I've got to look at. So I'm going to put that in another file. and we will look at that another time so that I can give it to some people and for them to fix. For me, I'm going to cheat it by control dragging this so that we can't see it. And then I'm going to go to T on my keyboard, and then control dragging again because it gives me a shortcut which allows me to do that. E, control drag again and do that. And then I will probably just place some form of glass thing there to give the sort of porthole look of this. And the easiest way to do that is let me get a sphere. How big is that loop? That loop is, oh, let's make it exact because I like making things exact. So it's 100 by 100, which means the radius of my sphere needs to be 50. And I can put that where I need it to be. I can make it a hemisphere. I can rotate it towards me. Holding down Shift after rotating allows you to lock stuff down to 5-degree increments. I'm going to stick that there, although it isn't going to be 90 degrees, is it? So let's kind of just match that. And this is entirely by eye. And then I'm going to scale it. Ooh, not that way. I need to make it editable first. Make it editable. Go to object mode and then scale it so it's kind of this chunky screen that looks like a porthole type thing. Okay, that's kind of the basics of the polygonal modeling. I'm about to do some stuff with subdivision surface. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, so there's a couple that we didn't get around to before. So Jeff was wondering, in version 26, where he can find the recent tool used palette.
That's a very good question, and I have to be perfectly honest, I was looking for it the other day because I rarely use it, but it is here on the left-hand side in the viewport itself. So it's this little floaty hub thing, and you can see that they are the most recently used tools. It has gone from the top bar. I didn't notice it go until literally 2 days ago when I went to look for it. But that's where it is, it's moved.
Cool, thanks. So yeah, sorry we didn't get around to that earlier. Mike was wondering, how are you going to fix the polygons on the bottom of the sphere, if you are at all?
Fix them?
I guess as it means, is it like an open hole? And we had a similar question about the bottom base of the machine.
Yeah. I could mess around with that if I particularly wanted to. If I'm not going to look at it, I don't care. It's kind of one of those things with modeling. There is no point spending time modeling detail into things that you're not going to see. You know, if I'm not going to see the bottom of that entirely, it would take up vital space in the UV map as well. So, bye-bye. We're not going to see it. We're not going to need it. Unless I really am going to look underneath it, I'm not going to worry. However, let's see what closed polygon hole does. Hey, thank you for an n-gon. Shh, don't tell anyone. But with an n-gon, I can also do grid. That doesn't work. Quads, which is interesting. Tries, which isn't going to make a difference. But quads will do what it can with some n-gons. And that's one way of filling it. The triangles aren't going to bother me particularly because we're not UV mapping it. So the back of the sphere, now here's an interesting thing if you guys don't know, soloing, yay.
However, I do think it would be cool to see this, but I think everyone's telling me that I'm misunderstanding the question. I think it was relating, or they're now saying it is relating to the missing polygons around the circle that you were then saying a bug. How would you fix that? And thank you everyone for correcting me there. I appreciate it.
Okay. How would I fix them? To be honest, I was actually going to get to that because as much as I said we don't need to worry, it was annoying me. And the thing that causes the issue, which is even not fixed here, which I find really strange, is the fact that the Cinema 4D is not registering that a polygon can do that. It is at the top, which is great, but it's not at the bottom, which is very strange. So you need to cheat it, and the only way to sort of wake Cinema 4D up to that, as far as I'm aware, is to triangulate it. So if you look, I'm going to select each of these, dunk, 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 and I'm going to right click and I'm going to triangulate it. And interestingly enough, now that seems odd. So I triangulated those. Yes, that worked. Good. Those didn't seem to have it, but I triangulated it. Right click, triangulate. I haven't the faintest idea where that is triangulating. That's triangulating there? Really? Well, it works, but can you see what it's now done? It's registered that that's a triangle. So the only way to fix this, because even my workaround for this side isn't working, this is really strange, is I'm going to have to manually create a polygon, which is going to be a line cut. So I say this point to there and watch it goes ping. Press escape to do the next one. That one to there, ping. And then again from there to there, ping. So that has, in theory, fixed the issue. Although, it's now not displaying the polygons, which is really weird. It's not displaying the edges, but nonetheless, it does seem to have fixed the problem, but hasn't actually created the edges. There's some fun there. That's going to take me a while to try and decipher. So I don't want to derail this completely with.
It was good to see those different tools though, because everyday kind of work comes across these types of issues. Not sometimes a tool doesn't do exactly what you envisioned it to do. So there are multiple workarounds, which is always useful to see.
And that seems to have fixed it without creating the same line, which I find really strange. It's also very strange that it works up here but not down there. So hey ho. Righty. I think I'm going to do exactly what I did the last time as well, which is I didn't like how small that looked, so I ended up scaling it up to a smidge. There we go. So there is, in essence, a very interesting version. Oh, of course, we have forgotten one important factor. We've forgotten the steampunk thing. So I'm going to do my other subdivide thing here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, click, that's it. And then I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. And yes, you're absolutely right. For those of you that have noticed, this is only going to work on one side because I didn't do it the other. But hey ho, I'm going to have to live with that. And then right click and there, fit to circle, which I haven't quite got in my brain yet where it's supposed to be. Apply. You can see we've got the same issue there. So let's see what on earth this does with these two, and then triangulate. Worked on one, not on the other. Hey, that's interesting. So let's triangulate that one, boom. And then K to just cut that. And now I have it. And it doesn't create it. I don't get that. I'm not going to lie. I'm assuming that it's not just created 2 points, is it? Nope, there's only 1 point there. So that's an interesting one. But nonetheless, loop to select that. And this is another interesting thing that I did. So I created that. I rotated this 90 degrees and I transformed it up. Now, I will come back to that in a minute. And then I created this. I expanded it out. I then hold down Control and did an extrude to give me that one. So I scaled an extrusion, which is useful, and then E to give me move, Control to go up, T to give me transform, hold Control, drag the mouse from right to left to give me that, E, Control and down, and that gives me the, yeah, it's one hell of a chimney. Now, the reason why I've left this, which isn't very nice, is because I'm going to loop select that and delete. And then using my edge selection, I'm going to loop select that and loop select that, although why that only wants to do half of it. M and B for bridging. And remember how much fun we had with our bridge tools? That's not pleasant. Reset the tool to default. Don't forget to reset. There we go, and I get what I was expecting. And then, of course, I can do subdivisions, and I can control the tension. And I can move stuff around. Let's go back to surface. That's where I was ending up. So I can make that a bit more interesting than we had previously. I don't think I want to spin it anywhere. That would be very strange. Let's try surface average. No, that doesn't work either. Normal average. That's a bit nicer. So I can just control that curvature from one part to another. That's interesting. Ooh, you can spend hours playing with this, but it all depends on like how you want it to look. So what I've ended up with normal, surface average, 3, tension. There we go. And for an interesting fact, now depending on what I want to do, I could make a symmetry object again and delete half of it, or I'm going to delete all of those. I'm going to loop select this, U and Y to grow selections, and then I'm going to manually select the rest of the polygons that I want. Ooh, this has gone crazy. Can you see it's not selecting properly? I was having this issue and I don't quite know what was doing it. So the only thing I found was to copy and paste everything into a new scene, and then things worked the way I expected. So I'm not entirely sure what that is, and it's probably another bug I'm going to have to report. Of course, Cinema 4D doesn't have bugs, and this is all a lie. But for the sake of the tool, what I wanted to show you as an advanced modeling is to select all of those, right click, and you can mirror your selection. And I'm just trying to remember now where it is.
If you go to the select menu at the top, you should be able to find it in there. Should be mirror. Yeah, mirror selection, UV.
That's a selection. I want to duplicate the polygons.
Oh. Oh.
That's gone. Okay, so let's have a look. Shift C, Commander, mirror. MH.
Good old Shift C.
That's definitely not there, is it? Oh, because they put it over here. Sorry, I'm still getting used to the new layout. I'm not going to lie. So, object, XZ, apply, boom, there it is. And hopefully, because it's got weld on, if I now move one of these, it didn't merge with anything that it should have done. So let's select, go to points mode, select all of the points, right click, optimize. In theory, it should have welded them together, which it did. So there was a fix. And for those of you who missed that, mirror tool on the left hand side, weld points should have done it, but that's beside the point. Apply, that created a second copy, which I can move around, but it is not attached. But the points are in exactly the same space as they should be. So what I can do, I can select all points with Control A, right click and optimize, and that welds points together if they are in the same spot. So now if I go to my polygon selection and move it, it is attached. Huzzah. So that is one of the things that I've done. Now, I'm just conscious I've got about 8 minutes to try and do some useful things. And one of the ones that I liked is using selections to create loops, and then using loops to distribute the nuts and bolts. So if I have a look in my Passe browser, it wasn't bolt, it's, where is it? Objects, screws, yes, there we go. So the nut cap, which I shall just double click, which downloads and puts it in here. And I think, because if you've noticed, I haven't done this to scale at all. So the nut is super tiny. So let's just scale that up to a size that we think wouldn't be embarrassing. There we go. So that's here, that's in the center. Now, what can I do? I want it to go all the way around the edge, here we go, of this particular loop. So I'm going to use my cube. I'm going to go to edge mode. I'm going to, ooh, that's going to be an interesting loop, which is not what I wanted to do. So I'm going to control click, control shift click, my favorite command, all the way across and all the way down. And that gives me that edge where I want the bolts to be. And right click, and there's a really useful edge to spline. So it creates the spline as a child to the cube, which is fine. And I'm just going to call that edge so that I know that's what I'm doing. And then let's use a cloner. But a cloner is for motion graphics and cool, funky things, isn't it? Yeah, but it's also really useful for modeling. And I can put the nut in the cloner and it will create, by default, its cloned render instances of all of these things, which is no use to me whatsoever. However, the cloner has an object mode, and an object can be a spline. Dunk. And now I have, in a really unhelpful fashion, spread these nuts and bolts, or these bolts, around the edge of the spline. I can change rotations and things like that. I can change the amount, which is quite cool. So let's have a look. It's currently on a distribution of count. So if I do that, it will do it, but it does it per segment, which isn't very helpful. So there's more in some bits than there is in another. So if I remove per segment, oh no, even, sorry. It now evenly distributes them, which is kind of okay, except they're all pointing the wrong direction. So using my transform tools, I think it's, oh no, that's scale, that's why it's not going to work. There we go. Let's make 90° on the B. And I have that. And because they're a bit sticky outy, I'm going to just adjust the transform of those ever so slightly to -5 so that they look like they're sticking into it. Yes, we've got an issue here. So what can I do? I'm just going to offset that a smidge until I get a variation that I like, which doesn't look awkward. or lower the count so that they spread out a bit further. And that's, the point is you can play with it as much as you like until you get something, oh, that one works, where it's not sticking out. Easiest way to do the other side, you guessed it. I'm going to use my symmetry, boom, and then I'm going to put that in there. Now, the fun thing about this is I really changed the way I did mine because I did something that was completely crazy. So that's how I would do edge to spline and make that work. The one that I had done previously, that is the file that you can get, is different because I added a subdivision surface to this, and that of course changes my shape immensely, to a point where I'm just going to turn that back off. I thought I almost prefer that. I really like the kind of chunkiness that that kind of gives, but it's got some issues that I now have absolutely no straight lines whatsoever. So there were a few things that I wanted to do. I'm just conscious of time. I don't know which one you want to texture, this one, Elly, or the one that I've sent you previously.
I've already got, yeah, the other one, which is the one that's on the project files that everyone else
that's
has.
fine.
Which could
So
be
there
cool.
are some other things in there. To be honest, the only other things that I added were the buttons and the joystick, which are immensely simple, but I just want to show this one as being something useful. So the trouble is, as soon as you add a subdivision surface, it weights everything and smooths everything and rounds everything too much. There is a wonderful tool called Subdivision Surface Weighting, which allows us to control how much influence this has, how much weight is applied to the object as a whole. So I'm going to select some edges to demonstrate this. And the shortcut for this is full stop. So if I hold down full stop on my keyboard and click and drag my mouse from left to right, you can see I've got the ability of controlling how much that is like the original cage or how much it is smoothed. And this is just what I'm going to nip in and do to some of our edges. And we're going to see what happens. Ooh.
We just
that one, but
Chad's just put a message in the chat. What's a full stop? And I love this. Is it a period? Is that what?
Period. Yeah, sorry.
British language with Matt and
Yeah. Native British languages with Matt and Elly. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to use your trick to go to Tools and Mirror Selection, which gives me both sides, and then hold down period, and I can like re-strengthen that, which is quite nice. I'm going to see if loop select allows. No, it doesn't like that one either. So I'm going to do some edges. Ooh. That's weirdly enough selected the loop that I wanted. Sometimes you need to turn the subdivision surface off and go that way, because you can now make head and tail of what you're trying to select. Oh, no, I don't need to do that, do I? I'm going to go U, V, and select both sides. Go here, tighten that up. There we go. And it's the same with some of these loops as well, depending on what you want to select. You have to select the edge, hold down period, full stop, and you can get these back, but while keeping some of the sort of interesting curvature. And it's just a case of playing with the shape that you want to work with. You know, some of these you might want to go, okay, well, I want this. And then you can pull it back in. So it kind of feels, I don't know why, but it reminds me of a submarine. And that's just one of those useful things to be able to use and control, which is slightly more difficult in other programs, is being able to control the curvature and the smoothing that you get from certain controls. Okay, that was a super fast, more advanced modeling, I guess, than the ray gun. Are there any questions? And then I think we'll throw it over to Elly.
Yeah, so there's a couple of kind of previous ones that you may want to run through while I'm then doing
Okay.
Redshift stuff. But stuff relating to this, Dan was wondering, is there a value to see how much subdivision weighting is applied to specific edges?
Yeah. There is a tag, and this tag allows you to see it based on a red value. I don't think you can see exactly how much there is. If there is, I may have forgotten. That was not particularly helpful, but if I select that edge, no, I don't think there is. I mean, technically there should be a record somewhere. Ooh. It kind of gives me an indication in the bottom left-hand corner if you can see the numbers going up and down, but there's no record, I don't think, as such. But I might look into that.
Cool. This question for you. Is there an advantage to modeling out all of the objects? Oh, sorry, modeling out of one object, in this case, what you just did with the cube, or is it a personal preference not modeling different objects like cylinders and then merging them together at the end?
For this, I would never normally do the funnels as part of the object. I did it so that I could show you the fit to circle things. Although it really does depend on the look that you are going for. You know, if I wanted, I don't want to look at that. If I wanted to make it look like it was merged, then I would have to make it be merged. Interesting things will come when you try and texture and UV map. But I'm definitely someone who has a tendency of throwing stuff together. If we look at the first one, lots of the stuff is separate. Oh, I forgot my little wibble. I might show people how to do that in a second as well, because that one's actually quite useful. But these are all just separate cylinders, spheres, and simple objects. You know, it really is super simple. It's just tubes and cylinders, and they just plonk on top. So there's nothing particularly complicated with that. So the only reason I did this is because I wanted to show you some interesting modeling tools that we could use. So just super simply, because I want to show you how to do this, I'm just going to do it in another scene. We have a really useful helix. So let's change the way that stands up. So it's XZ. Let's change the radius so that it's thinner. The number of times it goes round is based on the end angle. So I'm just going to times that by 8 and give me a lot. Maybe that's too much. So let's times it by 4. I said times by 4. So star 4. There we go. That's better. And then what I did, I created a rectangle, and that rectangle I added a rounding to the edge, which I extended out. And then in the helix, I added a spline wrap deformer. So I said, I want you to spline wrap around the rectangle. And I had to mildly adjust which way it went round. There we go, plus Y. And then I've got this coil that goes all the way around, which I really enjoy. I think that looks really clever. So if you want stuff to look like it's tasseled round. But how did I start and stop? Well, you can control the to and the from. And despite the fact that there isn't a slider to go below, you can click and drag and go below. So I actually did minus values to get those going round. And then the helix, it's a good old friend, the sweep. So the helix went in a sweep. I created a circle, the helix, that went in there, which is obviously way too big. Change that to 50. That's still too big. 25, yeah, crazy. 10, there we go. And there you have the nice curly roundy thing. Sorry, I just wanted to show that because actually it was quite a nice technique of using deformers on splines and things, but hey ho. Back to the questions.
Cool, so I think, let me have a quick look. I think we're okay for the questions. Oh, actually, one more. Would this method work? This is referring to the subdivision weighting. If I was to lay UVs.
That's a good question. I mean, technically, the polygons haven't changed. It's just how much the subdivision surface relates to where the edge is or is not. So you actually would UV unwrap that. In this instance, you would UV unwrap this and then apply a texture. Otherwise, you would have to make this editable, which gives you a very different polygonal mesh, which you could then unwrap, but you just have obviously a lot more polygons.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, there are some extra questions if you, I don't know, don't mind answering them in the background maybe while I do
I will do that and let you get on with the
first look.
Yep, no worries. So I will throw the screen to you.
Yes, thank you for that. We had a really great message from Travis saying, I'm actually working on a 3D job whilst listening and watching a webinar, and most of the techniques you've just helped me with on the current job.
Cool.
I think that's pretty cool.
Hooray!
That is very, very
my
cool.
camera off. Bye-bye, cat's still here.
I'll turn mine on. We'll trade. Cool. Can you see my screen? I have to ask.
We can.
Cool. So let me just drop in that file that you were just working on. And this is the one that is on the Dropbox. So it's the one that you guys can work on. Or build your own. That could be cool. Kind of go back, rewatch, and yeah, create your own. So we haven't got loads of time. We've got about 20 minutes left. So what I'm going to do a brief sort of first look at Redshift. So this is aimed at anyone who has never touched Redshift before, or you're very, very new to it, or maybe you're coming from like version 25 and you've opened 26 and you're thinking, where's everything gone? Because things have changed a little bit. So we're going to keep it brief. We're going to just have a quick look at like an introduction, where to find Redshift, render view, maybe add a light, add a couple materials, and then hopefully get our very first render, if we have the time, out of this. And then, because I thought it'd be really nice if we can get a first render, even if it's on this same project file, that's not a problem. It would be really amazing to see you guys build this yourselves and add textures. But then it'd be cool to have that kind of week one render, and then all the way down the line in week 6, it would be nice to then have a week 6 render, and we could have a comparison because it's going to be working on the same model, and so we'll be able to see, you know, how much we've kind of grown over these 6 weeks. So Redshift 3.5, that's the big thing. I'm on version 26 and Redshift 3.5 inside of here. And so the main thing now inside of this new version is Cinema 4D and Redshift are a lot more incorporated within one another. What we wanted to do, we wanted to make Redshift feel like a native part and a native renderer inside of Cinema 4D, as opposed to like a third-party plugin like it has been treated as before. And so the main thing here, when you're modeling inside of Cinema 4D, and I've been asked this question multiple times in kind of intro workshops and intro Redshift workshops, when you're modeling, it doesn't matter which renderer you're in. You don't need to have your renderer set to Redshift. You can have it set to standard, set to physical. That doesn't matter. All your geometry is going to be fine. So Matt has modeled this inside of Cinema 4D, and I would imagine his renderer was set to standard. When it comes to then working with Redshift and applying lights and applying materials and rendering, we do need to change our renderer first. That is like the first step once we've modeled our scene or our objects or whatever we're creating. And so the way that we do that is we come into our render settings, which is this little kind of like clapperboard with a cogwheel, and then we get our render settings in here. And we can change our renderer by coming over to this renderer section, dropping this down, and here's where you'll find all of your renderers. So we can see we have Redshift, standard, physical, viewport renderer, and if you have third-party renderers as well, so Arnold, V-Ray, Octane, those will show in there. And all you have to do is select it. And so before I select it, I want you to kind of keep an eye on this area here and this area here, and maybe even this area here, because something's going to happen when I change it. Cool, so I've changed it to Redshift. And so what you might notice is we've lost a whole lot of options here, but we've gained a Redshift option. Down here, our icons are looking a little bit different. And then now we also have a Redshift menu up here. And so this is what we mean by now incorporating Redshift a lot more into version 26 of Cinema 4D. So that's all I want to do. I don't need to worry about anything else. I'm not going to worry about changing render settings until part 6. So goodbye render settings, we don't need you anymore. So if I just click and hold these areas, we can now see that we have our Redshift options, and they have effectively replaced our what we'd call our standard Cinema 4D options for that same menu or that same tool. And we also have a Redshift menu up here. Those of you who are used to Redshift, have used it before, have used it in version 25, or are using it in 25, may also be used to a Redshift menu up the top. We can actually get that back. All you have to do is go to Edit, Preferences, and then inside of our preferences, if we just drop down our renderer to Redshift, we have under UI or user interface, we have a Redshift main menu, and we can click that, and then we get our Redshift menu back. So if you're used to working that way and you prefer that, then absolutely Edit, Preferences, Redshift, switch on the Redshift main menu. I'm used to working without it, but by all means, that is where you'd add that. So let's start to actually create something inside of Redshift. Let's work in it. Let's work with it. So the first thing we're going to do, so we've had a look at how we change our renderer to Redshift. So we're now working, I'll get rid of those. So we're now working technically inside of Redshift, inside of Cinema 4D. But how do we see things? And we do that by using our render view or something called an IPR. That's an interactive preview or progressive renderer. And there's two different options. So the first option is we can turn our viewport into a live IPR. The way that we do that is we can click this Redshift menu here, and then we can go to Start IPR. And then it's going to have a little think about it. The first time you click it, it just has to compile the shaders, so it might take a couple of seconds. And then now what's happened is our viewport has turned into our Redshift interactive progressive or preview renderer. And then now I can move around, and if I add my lights, my materials, it's going to show up in my viewport, and I can be moving around like this, and we have our renderer. To turn it off, come back in and just click the start IPR again. So that's a nice way of working. My personal preference is to use the render view. And so the way that we do that is we come into our window menu at the top, and then we can grab what's called a Redshift render view. And it's going to give me this second window with a whole load of buttons and a big screen. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to dock it. So we can customize our layouts. We can click these 3 lines on any of our different areas, different like toolbars, different palettes and panels, and we can rearrange it as much as we like. And a lot of people do this so it's more efficient for their workflow. I like to do this with my render view. I don't like to have it as a separate window. So what I'm going to do is dock it on the left-hand side of my layout, and I'm going to do that with these 3 lines, which I think is called the hamburger menu, which I like that name, but it makes me hungry. So let me just grab that here, and what you might notice, hopefully you can see a little like white, slightly translucent line whenever I am kind of moving this in a certain place. And if I let go, it's going to dock it inside of my Cinema 4D layout, and it's now there to stay. So the way that we kick off our render view, nice and simple. We have a start and stop IPR, which looks like a play button. All we got to do is click that. And now we're working in Redshift. We are looking at our first kind of, render. And it's not looking too great, but when we start to add some lights and start to add some materials, it will start to look a bit nicer than it does right now, because we haven't got any of those things yet. So if you've got to this point, congratulations, you are officially working in Redshift. Yes, gold star, we are there. And from here, we can now start to add the different elements. Woohoo, we're all there. So we can now start to add the different elements that we would normally then add if we were, for example, inside of standard or physical cinema, for example, our lighting and our materials. And so we're going to keep this super simple because we don't have loads of time. And the idea is we'll be covering a lot of this stuff recurring over the next 6 weeks. And then on week 6, we'll be really diving into a lot more Redshift. So don't worry if you don't pick up too much on this session. Don't worry. The whole point is, repetition for Redshift. That's the best thing. So I'm going to leave my render view playing. And so what's going to happen when I start to make some changes and add some cool Redshift stuff, we're going to see it update straight away in my render view on the left-hand side. A big thing here I do want to talk about is previously when I was inside of my IPR, my viewport renderer, I was able to move around and it was updating there and then. We don't move around in our render view, we still move around in our viewport. So that's the main thing here. We can't work around in here, but we can do this and it's going to update, look, in real time. Whee. Okay, cool. Right, so let's add some lighting. So where do we find our lights for Redshift? Well, as we saw, they have replaced the standard Cinema 4D lights in our toolbar palette on the right-hand side. So if I click and hold, these are all of our Redshift lights. And what's nice is their naming, like the terminology is similar to Cinema 4D. So we have our point light, our spotlight, our area light, etc. And so we're going to be diving into these in week 6 and maybe like later on in the weeks. But for this, for speed, I want to just get some quick, nice lighting and then light with a HDR image because it's so like it looks good and it's like 2 clicks. And that's what I like. I'm like speed all the way. So the way that we do that, the way that we light with a HDR is by taking something called a dome light. So if you used to work in Cinema 4D, you probably use the sky. You then get yourself a material, drop your HDR in the luminance, throw that on. We're going to do that similar workflow, but a Redshift version. So if I grab my dome light, we can then see we have this super bright light surrounding my entire scene, and we now have a bit of lighting going on. And it's looking nice, but it's looking a bit much at the moment. So how do we add a HDR? Well, before we do that, let's have a quick look. So inside of our Redshift dome light, we have a lot of tabs that we're used to if we've been in Cinema before. Our basic tab, our coordinates tab, and our project tab. Inside of our object tab, here is where we can control the intensity of our light. So we can, have it more intense, have it less intense, etc. we can control exposure, and exposure is a multiplier for our intensity. And then we could even colorize our lights. We could have some sort of like spooky red light going on. But let's leave that there. Let's leave that, you know, we'll leave that white. But the most important setting, or for me, the most important setting, is this texture input here. And this is where we can load in our HDRI image. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to come over to my asset browser. I love working in the asset browser. We have so much amazing content on there from like objects and models that Matt just showed. We have HDR images, we have materials, we have like texture maps, all of which we're going to be diving into over the next couple of weeks. So if we just type in HDR, we get it as a material, but we don't want that. We want the image media. So if we scroll down, these are the .hdr versions of the above materials. And all we need to do is drag and drop one of those into that texture input. If you also have some, like if you've downloaded some from the internet, you can do the exact same thing. You could actually put them into your asset browser if you want to. But if you haven't, just drag and drop them from like your Finder or I don't know, the Windows equivalent, and drop it into the texture input. So for me, I really like this GI empty room, especially when I'm creating like metal materials. So if I just double click it, you can see this is what it looks like and it's pretty nice. So I'm going to drag and drop this into my texture. And it's going to update straight away because I've still got my render view playing. And I'm just going to close my asset browser. And so we can see we're already getting, if we look at the model itself on the left-hand side, we're getting some pretty nice lighting going on, but we're also seeing it in the background. And so sometimes you may want this if you've got like a nice like sunrise or sunset landscape going on, you might want to keep it in there. But for me, no, we don't want it in there. And so the way that we can effectively switch off our background is by coming into our dome light, and then we can go into our environment background and switch it off. So super simple, super easy. And we even have color controls as well. So hue, saturation, and gamma. And this is relating to our HDR image. So you'll notice that they become active when you load in a HDR. So let me just sort of like pull this down a little bit because I find it's quite blue. So I'm just gonna pull this down. So relatively quickly and easily, we have now set up what looks like some quite nice lighting. So if I switch this off and we have a look at it, if I just sort of like maybe come a bit closer and then switch it back on, we can see that we're getting some nice lighting just by using this dome light and then a HDR that we stole from the asset browser. Then we can, like any sky or environment or HDR, we can actually rotate it. So if I hit R with my dome light selected, I can actually rotate it. And if you look on the left-hand side, you can see how it's having an effect on our object, and we're getting different kind of shadows and a different kind of lighting going on in our scene. And so rotating a dome light so you can get some really nice shadows on there is always a great tip. So we've got our lighting going on. Now let's quickly add our very first Redshift material. And don't worry, we're not going to be going into the node editors today, but it is something we're definitely going to talk about over the next couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about the Cinema 4D node editor as well as the Redshift shader graph. I know the question came up in the chat and someone was asking about differences and etc. and all that kind of stuff. And so absolutely, we will talk about the two, but the focus will be on the C4D node editor. So how do we create our first material? So we open up our material manager, which is this little hotkey up here, and then we get our materials. But we can't see any at the moment because we haven't made any. So we're going to create our first Redshift material. And the main thing here, because we've changed our renderer to Redshift, when I double click, I get a Redshift material. So no longer do we have to change this so we get a Redshift material like we had to previously. It is now intelligent enough to know that, hey, you're working inside a Redshift, so I'm going to give you a Redshift material. And this is what we have. So there's a couple of ways that we can then make some changes to this material. So we could work in our attributes manager down here, or we can actually double click and then we get a material editor. So previously you used to double click and it would immediately open up one of your node editors. Now we have this nice kind of middle ground. We have a material editor that allows us to edit the base properties of our material, which is perfect for this first ever look at Redshift and first ever look at materials. We're not worried about the node editor. We can open it by clicking this button here, and then eventually we're going to get to this, but not today. We just want to focus on our base properties. So that's what we're going to do. So let's drop this onto our object. And so all I did was drag and drop that, and now we can see we have that in here. So let me just pull this over so we've got a bit of room. So we've got a bit of a default grey material. Let's create like a copper metal, and we can do that inside of our base properties. So if I just double click my material, we have our material editor. And what I like about the original Redshift material is we have a bunch of preset options, which are a really great, one, they're great on their own, but they're also a really great starting position, a starting point for creating different textures. Because if we have a look at these base properties, we have diffuse, we have reflection, sheen, refraction, as well as a whole bunch of different options inside of here. But so many settings, so many parameters to learn. What if I just want like a simple copper texture or a gold texture? Well, all we have to do is drop down our presets, select one of them. So there aren't loads, but they're a good starting point. So let's grab copper. As we can see, we have this crazy shiny copper going on. And what it's done is it's changed some of our reflection settings. So our BRDF has changed to GGX, which is a really great kind of BRDF for metals. We have a Fresnel type of color, reg, and tint, which is a really nice artist-friendly way of controlling the color of our metal material. And then we have like a roughness setting as well. So reflectivity, this is going to be the color of our metal. And so we might think this is a little bit too, this is really kind of very orangey, very bright and vibrant, which might be the style you're after, but I'm going for a little bit slightly more grungy. So let's just sort of make this a bit darker. And we can see how big of a difference the reflectivity color makes with regards to kind of like the dark and light values. And then we also have a metal edge tint. And if I just sort of put something crazy in here, you can see how this is sort of like our reflection color. And so I deliberately put blue just so we can really notice it. But normally we would want to have a sort of like similar matching color. So let's just sort of maybe add a bit of roughness to this. And then we have our very first Redshift material that we've made. And so that is one way of creating a material. The second way I wanted to really quickly show is if we go into create Redshift, we have what's called a new Redshift standard surface material. And this came with version 3.5, and it is a more industry standard way of working. And I believe this will be kind of the way that materials are created in the future. And so I wanted to show both of these methods, because the downside to this method is we don't have our presets, which I think especially for a first look at Redshift, an introduction to Redshift, the presets are invaluable when it comes to creating our first render. And so we saw how quickly I was able to create a copper material, select a preset, change the color, change the roughness, boom, done. But I do want to talk about these settings as well. We're not going to be going into too much detail, but what you can see is we do have a different set of options. So we have different diffuse models and metalness options. as well as some different reflection, transmission, and thin film options. So as much as I can, I'm going to try and dip in and out of the two over the next 6 weeks. But if we wanted to create let's create another material using the standard surface. So we're going to come in and we're going to create this sort of like the nuts and bolts material. So let's just drop that on here. And we can see, let me drop that on that second one. We can see it's updating here, and we have that same kind of default grey material. And if I want to turn this into a metal material, really simple. All we have to do is increase our metalness value. So at the moment we have a value of 0, so we have like a diffuse material. If I put this on a value of 1, we now automatically have a metal material, which is then going to be controlled by our reflection roughness to control our reflectivity. So I could have a really shiny material, I could have a really rough material. Let's sort of pull this back down. And then with the standard surface, the color is then controlled by the base color. So before it was controlled by the reflectivity color in the Redshift material, but in the Redshift standard material, we can control it inside of this color. So I could have like a sort of like a pinky red metal going on. And there we have some of our first textures inside of Redshift. So I'm aware that we're running over, but I do want to quickly cover how you can actually render out your first project. So let's just very quickly finish off our materials. So let me just maybe not do that, throw some of these on here. So we're going to keep this red, I quite like it. And then I'm just going to create another new material. And I'm going to stick to using a iron preset. And my iron preset is going to be, it's going to replace these little kind of like nuts and bolts here. I think they'll look a little bit better as that iron. So all I'm doing is dragging and dropping these same materials onto our different objects. I missed there. So let's just throw these on. Do we have any questions in the meantime while I'm just quickly adding these onto here?
Yes.
Yes. I can try and multitask.
I'm now just trying to scroll back up. How much is Redshift integrated into the asset browser? Are there specific presets, materials, light setups, for example?
Okay, so not so much at the moment, but it is happening and it is coming. So the perks of the asset browser is we can update it, and we do update it every month or every couple of months with new content, with new sort of setups, new materials. And so there are some, I'm trying to think what I would need to search. If I search stone, for example, we have some Redshift specific objects. So you can see we have the Redshift icon, and what that means is they're already optimized for Redshift and their materials are already Redshift materials. And so this is going to be happening more and more. I am pushing for this. I'm a real advocate for this because I love the asset browser. I love working with it. And so the more that we can have sort of Redshift incorporated in the asset browser, the better and better it's going to be. The perks of Redshift is a lot of the materials that I build and that I create from scratch, I use with texture maps. We have texture maps inside the asset browser. And so if I search the word scratch, we have like image media. So we have tileable texture maps inside of here. Let me just move these down. So stuff like this. So these sort of like scratch maps inside of here, which we can then use inside of our node material setup to create these incredible materials. And this is something we will be doing later on in the week. So even though we don't necessarily have lots and lots of already pre-made materials, we do have the texture maps that allows us to create these materials, but it is coming because I want it to come, and a lot of people do as well.
A couple of people are asking, is it possible to set as default to create a new Redshift material as opposed to anything else?
When you change your render to Redshift, it will do.
You also can change it as well. If you go to Edit and Preferences, on the left-hand side, you have Material. You can change the default to be, standard PBR, Uber, Node, Sketch, or Hair,
I think
but
Node
not
would work.
Redshift. Okay, yeah, because it's a nodal material, isn't it? Yes, that's true.
Yeah. So yeah, you can. However, I would recommend just changing your render to Redshift if you're then going to be building Redshift materials. You're going to be having it as default anyway.
You know the asset browser you were looking at earlier, and you saw specific ones that said it had the Redshift tag next to it?
Yes.
Do they actually have a keyword like Redshift as well, so that we can? So what did you search for earlier?
I knew they were called stone. Let me.
Okay, can you just open one? Yeah, select one. You should be able to select it, and it will appear. There we go. So
yeah, I'm trying to see if it has keywords. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Let me get rid of that for now, so we can actually make this bigger. Okay, there are a lot of keywords.
A lot of keywords. Oh no, that's assignable. Currently, it only has rocks and stone actual keywords above. Yeah, so that's a bit of a shame. So they're not actually. Yeah, so they're not kind of tagged as such. That was another question.
Yes, they are not. But that is a good suggestion. Maybe I will suggest that to the relevant people, because that could be a great idea.
Yeah, because then we can tag, these are already Redshift ready things.
Yeah, I suppose we can add our own if you do want to, but it would be, as you said, it would be great to have them as default.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just throwing these last textures on, then we can actually set up a quick render. Oh, okay, cool. Right, so this is what we have. And I did want to talk about polygon selection very, very, very quickly, because I did promise that I would do this inside of the questions area. So if we want to create a polygon selection, so let's say I want this top area of this tube to be this different color. So I'm going to find the particular object, and so in our case it is the cube that Matt started and built from. I'm going to go into my polygon mode, and as you can see, I've already kind of been doing this. And I'm going to grab my loop select, which is UL. I'm just going to shift click to select the area that I then want to be the different material. If we go to select and then store selection, so previously it was called set selection, it is now called store selection. We can do that. We then get a little triangle tag here, which is our polygon selection, and then we could name it something relevant just so we can remember which one it is, because you might have a bunch of different selection tags on the same object, and it could get confusing if they're all called polygon selection. So I'm going to call it tube top, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to drag my material onto here, and then it's going to overtake my previous material because it's the last one on the run. But all we need to do, if I click that material that I just added, which is my iron material, it's asking for a selection, drag and drop your selection in, and then now we have a different color top. Cool, so let's officially render this out. So how do we render this out? How do we get our very first Redshift, render? All we're going to do, come up to our render settings, which is where we changed our renderer. And we'll just very quickly go through these. Your output is the output resolution of your render. And so if we were going to do for example, if we're going to do like an Instagram thing, we could do 1080 by 1350. And then you can see my slightly lighter area of my viewport here is what is going to be rendered. So we can come a little bit in here and get a bit of a shot. We then have a save area, And so choose your file path where you want to save, and then choose your relevant format. I'm not going to set that up now, but that's what you would need to do in order to save your render out. And then what we're going to do, so inside of Redshift, we have two different modes. We have a basic and an advanced, and we're going to be covering these in a lot more detail, especially the advanced tab in week 6. But for now, for your very first render, basic is your friend. Basic works perfectly. It gives you the main settings that you could possibly need when creating your first render. We have our bucket quality. This is the quality of your render: low, medium, high, very high, custom. And it translates to what's called an adaptive error threshold, which is our threshold for sampling. So the lower the number, the lower the adaptive error threshold, the more samples and the higher quality your render is going to be, the less kind of grainy, the less noisy, but the longer it's going to take. So if you notice, if I click very high, our threshold goes to 0.001. If I go to low, it goes to 0.1. So we can see we have a different threshold and how that's going to affect the quality of our render. I find for a lot of things, medium works fine, especially when working in the basic tab. Progressive passes relates to when you're in your render view. This is called a progressive render. So it's gradually going to get clearer and clearer and clearer because it is progressively rendering it. And this is just for the render view. The final render will be what's called a bucket render. And so if I hit my bucket render here, it's going to do the different squares, which are called buckets, and it's going to do the final render of those. As we can see, it takes a little bit longer, but we're getting a full and final result. We have denoising and motion blur, things that we'll cover later on, and we have global illumination on by default. So as I said, basic tab has all the settings that you could possibly need for your very first render. It's all your major settings. And all we have to do once we've set those up is we hit our render button, and then we're going to get our very first render. And so while that's happening, Dimitrios in the questions area, I think he's gone now, unfortunately, but he was saying it would be great to assign homework. And I know that a lot of people are extremely busy and probably have so many things going on and maybe can't even attend these 2-hour workshops. But it would be really great and to not only see what you guys create, but for you guys to have your very first render. And then, as I said, compare it to the one at the end. So this is the very first render, and I want to show you the hero image and the idea of what we're going to create in week 6, and it might kind of push you to want to do this first render to then compare the two. So let me open this up. So if we do a little comparison, this is going to be kind of the main idea for week 6 inside of Redshift, and as we can see, they're looking a little bit different. Just a little bit.
One is after I've played it too much.
Yes.
It's got a bit grungy.
So I'm like pressing all the buttons and it's smoking at the top. And it's like glowing.
Yeah. Shiny and new on the left and not so much.
Yes. Yes. So this is going to be the aim. So I think it would be really amazing to have a kind of week 1 and then a week 6 comparison. But it is not necessary. We're not going to assign you official homework. These are just suggestions that you can take on board if you have the time. But we know we're all very busy people. So yeah, that was our final render there, just with our quick kind of base materials inside of here with a dome light and just some basic render settings. And we have our very first render.
Woohoo!
So are there any questions on that before we do a quick roundup? I'm very aware that we are 15 minutes over. I am very sorry, but we
never overrun.
We never overrun.
No, actually, I think we're okay question wise. So
yeah.
Yeah, well done. Thank you very much for that. I'll turn my camera on for the last.
Perfect. Let me find my final little bits and bobs that I like to show. So yeah, really quickly before we round up and we sort of do our thank yous and everything, I just wanted to talk about the plan for next week. So yes, session 2, week 2, part 2, whatever we're calling it, working with volumes. So the idea is we're going to be learning about the volume builder and the volume mesher and the workflows for that, in particular modeling in what we call SDF mode. So Matt's going to model a lightsaber, which is going to be super cool. I mean, I've already seen it and it's already on the project files if you want to have a look at it and break it down. But we'll be diving into that. And then we're going to look at creating some volume fog. Again, using the volume builder, but inside of fog mode. And then this is going to allow us to then render the volumes with Redshift. And so you can see in that last hero shot, we had the kind of smoke coming up the top. That's the same kind of idea and the same kind of process. And then we can add details of noise, and then we're going to add fog to our lightsaber. And then hopefully, again, we're going to have a really cool looking model and a cool looking render after that 2-hour session. So I just want to say thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much, Matt. Like I love doing these workshops with you. We've both been super excited. I've been super excited to get this started after sort of like putting it together, putting the project files together. Yeah. We just want to like get it going, and it's been a good first week.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you very much for that, and for showing all of the fun stuff that you can now do in Redshift, which of course sits natively inside of Cinema 4D S26. And we will see you guys all next week.
Yes, and I want to say thank you quickly to everyone on the questions area that did ask questions, that's here with us, that's still here, 20 past the hour. We really appreciate it. And if you're catching this on YouTube, thank you so much. And we're looking forward to seeing you on, the next couple of weeks.
Right. Take care, all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.